Buenas tardes. Queremos ofrecer nuestro sentido pésame a las víctimas, a las familias, a la comunidad de El Paso también, a la comunidad de Ciudad Juárez, esta comunidad binacional. El ejemplo, yo pienso, para este país en este momento. I'm so grateful to be here right now with all of you. So grateful to be alive under this beautiful sky, in this beautiful city, with all of these beautiful people, who I believe are the example to the rest of this country at this moment of truth. Yesterday, as I was flying back to El Paso, there was a young man on my flight who approached me and introduced himself and said that he too was flying back home to El Paso because his mother had just been shot, he had learned. Did not know her condition, only knew that she was at University Medical Center and was going to move every mountain, get on any flight, do whatever it took to be there by her side. And he asked me if I would join him with him in the intensive care unit that she was in. So we got to El Paso, went up, visited with Rosemary, who had been shot in the chest by this gunman. Both of her lungs were pierced. She had this big, beautiful, strong, courageous, confident El Paso smile on her face when her son walked in. When she saw all of us, watched the fluid from her lungs being drained out in a tube that ran alongside her bed. Her family, that love, the encouragement that they gave to one another, the hospital staff there, that nurse who had been working for the last 14 hours and did not feel a second of it because he was giving everything he had to Rosemary and the other patients who had come in. Those doctors who took the patients as they came in the trauma bays, kept them alive, performed miracles for our fellow El Pasoans, for the Juarezes who came to that hospital as well, for our fellow human beings. Rosemary, one of the most courageous people I have ever met. We checked on her a little bit earlier this evening, and she's doing better. She was actually able to sit in the chair next to her bed. And you wonder where she gets that courage. And I found part of the answer this morning when I visited her mother at Del Sol Medical Center, who was shot in the stomach as she walked into that Walmart with Rosemary. Shot in the stomach, but did not stop for a second after she was shot until she had been able to attend to everyone in front of her, making sure that everybody else was okay before she finally succumbed and had to lay down and was rolled out and was taken to Del Sol, along with her sister, who was also shot. One family, 3 people, grievously wounded. And that's just one story from this community of nearly 3 million people joined, not separated by the Rio Grande River, offering not just an example to the rest of the country, but the best place on planet Earth, if you ask me. In the UMC waiting room, as we came out after having the chance to meet Rosemary, a gentleman came up to me and he said, I'm waiting here to see my mother-in-law. She's just coming out of surgery. She and my father-in-law, husband and wife, also were walking into Walmart. They just celebrated their 70th wedding anniversary. They're in their 90s right now. It's been all day. We've called over to Del Sol, we've called the police department, we've called everyone we can think of, and we have yet to hear how her husband is doing. And we fear the worst. After this long, beautiful life together here in this community. And as we said goodbye to them, another family approached us. A woman told us that her husband was in surgery at that moment. He too had been shot in the chest. He's a soccer coach for a girls' team here in El Paso, and they were selling lemonade and horchata along with other soccer coaches and parents and their kids who were with them. Shot point blank range. She did not know if he was going to come out of it. She'd seen him earlier in the day. He was not conscious. He was alive. She hopes that she's going to be able to do better. She doesn't know, but she asked me, why, Beto, does this keep happening in this country? Why did this happen to us? Why will this not stop happening? What is it going to take? Today, we went by the blood bank on Mesa Hills. There were people who had been waiting in lines stretching back to yesterday in order to be able to donate blood to their fellow El Pasoans, their fellow human beings. We met a young man named Manuel who worked at the Walmart but had the day off yesterday. Perhaps racked with some kind of guilt, came in at 7:30 a.m. this morning. We saw him at 3 o'clock this afternoon, had been waiting that entire time just to be able to do something, to give something, to be able to answer her question about what we do in the face of this violence and this hatred. There are so many right now who want to make us afraid of each other, make us angry, keep us apart based on our differences, seeking to divide us and keep us from the greatness that should rightfully be ours. This community has borne the brunt of it. And those of you who grew up in El Paso and Ciudad Juarez know exactly what I'm talking about. The rest of this country projecting their fears on us, on immigrants, on Mexicans, on those who do not look like the majority of the United States of America, expressed in militarization, in walls, in thousands of people who have died trying to enter this country in the first place. And yesterday, we bore the absolute worst of it. In a community for the last 10 years, which has averaged 18 murders a year for the entire year, we saw 20 people gunned down in one day. And as you well know, but it bears repeating so the rest of the world knows this, he was not from El Paso, Texas. He was from half a state away, bringing that fear, bringing that anger, bringing that hatred, and bringing that racism.
And the gun.
And the gun.
Semi-automatic.
And you're right. We have a president right now who traffics in this hatred, who incites this violence, who calls Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals, who calls asylum seekers animals and an infestation. You may call a cockroach an infestation. You may use that word in the Third Reich to describe those who are undesirable, who must be put down because they are subhuman. You do not expect to hear that in the United States of America, in this age, in our generation, with this beautiful country that decided 243 years ago that we would not define ourselves by race or ethnicity or our differences, but by the fact that we are all created equal. But though we have borne the brunt of this intolerance and this racism and this hatred and this fear, it also so happens that America can look in El Paso, look to this community to see the answer to it. One of the safest cities in the United States of America, not despite, but because nearly a quarter of those who were born in El Paso, more than a quarter of those who live in El Paso were born in another country, chose us, left their family, their community, their nation, sometimes their language, to start anew here, to do better for themselves and their kids for sure, but because they also wanted to do better for all of us, and by their very presence, they have. We are safe and strong and secure because we are a community of immigrants. We do not just tolerate or respect our differences. We embrace them as foundational to our success and to our safety. I am so proud of El Paso at this moment, a community that will not be defined by the murders that we saw yesterday, but instead in the way that we choose to overcome them, define ourselves by our love, our courage, our confidence, and our strength in the face of this weakness and fear and intolerance, and the example that we will provide to the rest of the country. That our differences are not dangerous, they do not define us, they will not divide us, that once and for all, we will choose to come together and ensure that every single American can live to their full potential, and they will look to us here in El Paso for the example. Are you ready to provide that? We must provide that. And let's do this. Let's keep every single one of those families in our prayers. Let's continue to share the story of El Paso and Ciudad Juarez and this binational community with the rest of the world. And then let's listen to Manuel and Patricia, who remind us that in addition to the racism and the hatred and the fear and the intolerance, we are a country that has accepted thus far 40,000 gun deaths every single year. No other country comes close, and we know the solutions. Universal background checks where we close every single loophole. An end to the sale of assault weapons in the United States of America. And making sure that we adopt red flag laws so that anyone who poses a danger to themselves or to someone else, someone in your life or their lives, is stopped before it is too late. I want all of us to welcome Manuel and Patricia and Andrea and to thank them for celebrating Joaquin's 19th birthday here in El Paso, Texas. We warmly welcome you. We are grateful that you are here. We are honored to have you. Yes. Wow.